Welcome to the 3 Rule Parenting Podcast, where we have conversations about parenting with grace and how to better disciple our own children. I'm Pastor Melissa. I have a beautiful 20-month-old daughter, and I'm a single mom.
My name is Reverend Bill Malden, and I have 2 kids in high school, and I do family ministries here at the church.
My name is Reverend Kevin Anderson. I have 2 kids, one in junior high, one in high school, and I'm the pastor of community.
And we didn't quit after episode 1. We've made it all the way to episode 2. So we've done all this based on John Wesley's 3 general rules. And his 3 general rules are do no harm, do good, and keep the ordinances of God. Or as we like to say it, stay in love with God.
So last time we talked about do no harm. And I like that we even kind of had the idea of really what we're saying is do as little harm as possible. Do less harm. But we don't want to just focus on the negative. We talked about love and logic being a great resource for thinking through how to do discipline without doing harm. But again, we don't want to focus on just the negative pieces. We want to talk about how do we do good? How do we build up the positive? And so there's another resource I'd like to bring to your attention. There's something from the Search Institute, and it's called the 40 Developmental Assets. And this is a resource I think that can help parents think through how are we bringing through positive things? What are we wanting to encourage? What can we do to build the best? The 40 developmental assets have 20 external assets. These are programs you can put your kids in thinking through the exterior life of your child. Then there's also 20 interior assets. These are like character development, things like that.
And I love that balance of things because, in the Christian life, like a lot of times we forget that we don't believe in the Greek philosophy of dualism. We don't believe that there's a separation between our body, our spirit, and our mind, but we believe that all of these things come together. So to care for our whole child, to do good for our whole child, we need to incorporate both of those pieces in their, all of those pieces in their life of caring for their bodies, caring for the things that we allow them to do, but also caring for the internal state of our child as well.
And so the interesting thing with Search Institute has tracked the number of assets that kids have in their life, and they followed kind of their success as they grow up, what it becomes of their lives. And so one of the things that they have found as a target goal is having kids having at least 31 of the 40 assets. And what they have found, I'll give you some statistics that they put forward, that kids who have at least 31 assets have about a 1% likelihood of getting involved in illicit drugs. But you put that against kids that say only have 20 assets in their life, well, they have a 19% chance of getting involved in illicit drugs. Kids with fewer than 10 assets, actually that skyrockets up to 41% likelihood of getting involved with drugs. And they also look at success, positive things. Kids with 31 assets have a 58% chance of being successful in their school life. Whereas kids with just 20 assets, that drops down to 20% are likely to be successful at school. And so these assets, they're not a guarantee of anything, but they do increase the probability and the likelihood of maximizing the benefits for our kids and minimizing the things that we're concerned about, the downsides. And so that's where I think this idea of doing good is that it encourages and it gives you a checklist as parents of what can we do to be bringing good into our kids' lives. Here's 40 different ways that we can do that.
So parents are probably thinking right now, like, I can do a Google search and like the Search Institute and all that's going to pop up with the 40. But as we're talking about it, what are some of those things that pop to your mind that are some of those 40 that are examples?
Yeah, so one of the ones I actually would like us to talk about is it's one of the internal assets, and it's trying to remember how they phrase it. It's personal power is an internal asset, and this is the attitude that we can control the things that happen to us versus being a victim. When I was taking like psych in college, freshman psych, I remember them talking about this being the difference between the internal and external locus of control. Do you feel like everything happens to you and you're just kind of a leaf on the wind getting blown around by life,
and you have no control over it? You think that no matter what you do,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Right.
make any difference. So
Yeah,
this is about the control of that.
I think we've all experienced people in our lives where, like, you almost want to just, like, shake them of, like, take some control in your
Right.
life. I can't
We're
say
not
that I've
going to name
experienced
those
that with...
people, though, right?
No.
That'll be on episode 3.
I can't say I've experienced that with my own child at this point
Right.
in her life, but I can't imagine what that would get multiplied out if that was happening in her life, how I would feel of being like, I don't want you to experience this.
And when you're talking about this, you're talking about the kids or our own children and
Right.
how they, have these attributes, but how do we help them to look for these?
I'm glad
Do we straight out name them? Do we have a list on the refrigerator?
Right.
What's the best way for us to communicate these things to for
Right.
Melissa, Ellis is 20 months old.
Right.
It's going to
I
be a
got
little
some
different
time.
than, you and I who have high schoolers. We can have a conversation on a deeper level about this. How can we do that for our own kids?
Yeah, so I think it really becomes twofold. So I think it starts first and foremost with us as the adults and us as the parents being aware of these assets, especially these internal assets, and beginning to practice them ourselves.
Okay.
So I think the first step we have to do is role model them and, make them a part of who we are. And then I love that you said, again, do we talk about it and address it? Yes. Once we've now made sure that we're living this out, we then find when these things come up, these opportunities to go for those teachable moments.
Right.
Here's why I'm doing this. Here's why I believe this is important. But I think it's really important that we are intentional about role modeling these before, rather than just lecturing and, do as I say, not as I do. You should do these quality things. I think the first thing for us as parents is to go, am I living out these virtues?
Yeah.
And then after it, we do need to narrate it. We do need to explain it. We do need to teach it. But once they can see our practical life and then put the words to it.
Mm-hmm. And I think of, like, I don't know why this is the example that pops to my mind of, like, the victim mentality.
Right.
But I can think of examples in my own life, and then even my sister, who is 9 years behind me, right? Of there are teachers that you click with growing up, and there's teachers that you just don't, right? And so I think a lot of times as the student, and then even, like, my dad hearing us, like, if we're talking about a teacher that we don't like, is the position of the parent to immediately assume the teacher is in the wrong?
Right.
Or is it to say, maybe my child's personality doesn't click with this teacher? Or is there even something that this teacher could be, like, teaching, offering to my child in this, right? And not assuming from a place of a negative, but getting a little further in that, or a place of, like, a victimization kind of thing. So not allowing our child to kind of slip into that of, oh yeah, this teacher just doesn't like you because obviously you're the shining bright student in the midst of that, but digging a little deeper and helping our child to engage that narrative and naming it with them as well.
Yeah, so I recently read a book by a man named Donald Miller, and it's called Hero on a Mission, and he had a couple of interesting ideas in his book. But one of the things that I first became aware of it and got interested in, he says that if we think about our lives in terms of story, in most interactions, we're either playing the victim, the villain, the hero, or the guide. And what Miller says is there are people who are real victims. There are people that things really happen to. He said, but most of us, most of the time, are playing victim more than we are truly victims.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's a different thing between not everybody's playing victim. There are some real victims in this world, and that needs to be talked about separately. But most of the time we're playing victim, and so there's playing victim, and that's this external locus of control. The world's happening to me, I can't do anything. There's no power, and there's no agency to make things different. And so you're just a leaf on the wind getting blown around. And then he talks about that many of us start off feeling this victim thing, and then we tend to respond in one of two ways. That as we hopefully gain power, there's the negative way that we go with that, which is to become the villain, who says, I don't want to get hurt anymore. Now I'll use my power, not necessarily to hurt others, but to make sure I don't get hurt, and I'm willing to hurt others
So
to make I don't
get hurt.
experience it again. And what becomes the hero mentality is, instead of just protecting myself, I want to fight the thing that was hurting people. And so it becomes generalized over others. And so you fight.
It's the parable of like the child that keeps showing up like in the river and like having to pull the children out versus sending the people upriver to say like, why are these children being kicked into the, like ending up in the river in the first place.
And so heroes end up using their power to try to make things better for themselves and for others. And so it's a different kind of idea. And then he says the fourth one is the guide. And this is somebody who has lived the life of the hero and has won their battles or even lost their battles. But now they've gotten to a place in their life where they have the strength of ego to realize I'm not the main character anymore. And I'm now going to support. And so where I think this comes up with our kids is we need to be the heroes in our own lives, meaning that, again, living out that 20 internal assets, that's rising to the challenge of being the hero in our own story. But then we get to be the guide in our children's lives and say, you're the hero of your story, and I'm here to guide you. I'm not going to be the hero in your life. You're the hero in your story. I won't be your hero. I'll be your guide. I'm going to help you grow up to be the hero.
So I'm trained in leadership coaching, and when I do coaching with people the first time, a lot of times I love to use in Proverbs, there's a creation story, and it's actually one of my favorite takes on the creation story, and it's actually wisdom personified, and she is peering over God's shoulder, and she's delighting, and she's curious, and watching how God is sitting down at this architect's table, sketching out the bounds of creation. And so how I like to talk about leadership coaching is that, God is the only one that could make creation, right? We are the only one that can live our lives. We are the only one that can put pen to paper on our lives and actually sketch out the bounds of what we will do and not do, what we're going to erase, right? All this kind of stuff. But God or the Holy Spirit or our parents, right? Those guides can be curious. They can delight. They can ask us good questions, and they can ask us these questions of it to help try and clarify the picture for us as we're going. And I love to use that image in coaching, but I also love that image in parenting to think about how can I offer that to my child without trying to grab the pen in her hands like I've done a couple of times, because she's still so little, but sometimes it's I really want you to do this thank you card, but you're not doing anything, but let's help you scribble on it a little bit. She's starting to do some on her own, but if you've received a thank you card from Ellis, it definitely wasn't yours that happened with.
Well, and that's the other thing that Miller talks about that I like. The other idea that he has in his book that I really liked is he's talked about in our own lives, but especially teaching this with our children. Imagine their life is a book or a movie, and then ask the question, what story do you want to write? And how do you want this story to end? And then, okay, here's where you are. Here's the ending you'd like to see.
Yeah.
And then what do you need to do in the meantime to create that ending? And one of the things he talks about is even writing your own eulogy, especially for us as adults.
Yeah.
Write your eulogy about how do you want to be remembered? Who do you want to be when you leave this earth, and go, what do I need to do to become that person? And then that becomes the work that we do, is we now live our lives becoming that story, and even teaching our children to do this. Be the hero of your story. Who do you want to be one day? Again, I talk about this with youth all the time.
Yeah.
You are made in God's image, and you can create a world that doesn't exist. You can create a version of you that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
What you do you want to help God make? The two of you come together and make. And what do you want that to look like? And then what do you need to do to become that?
And I highly recommend, this is a great practice to actually write down. It's so funny that, we're having this conversation today. So last week I actually was going back through one of my journals from my time in the Holy Land to do some filming of some stories from that, and I actually came across this prayer I had written, and in that prayer I realized I'm writing about this dream life of mine, and in it it's wow, I'm living that out. Maybe I need to rip this page out and stick it to the mirror of my bathroom so I remember every morning this is the life that I'm called to and that God's calling me to. But how beautiful would that be to not just offer that to myself as the example, but also, I said it on last week's episode of the podcast, but again, I want to do things to teach Ellis by
Right.
exemplifying it in myself
Right.
first.
I like when Kim Long, when she was preaching, she talked about creation and the creation story in Genesis, but then talked about us being the clay. God's the potter, but that we, because we are made in the image of God, we have the power to create. And there is I like that we have the power to do that, so it gives us some ownership.
Oh, yeah.
How do we teach that to our kids? I think this is a great way, especially with my kids and the age they are. They love movies. And they love, there's always...
I have no idea where they got that from.
Me neither. I mean, no clue whatsoever. It all comes from, Star Wars and all these sci-fi and adventure movies all come from, it's a book by David Campbell. It's a Hero of 1,000 Faces, and it's about archetypes, and we have...
Joseph Campbell.
Yeah. What did I say?
David Campbell.
It's Joseph Campbell.
It is Joseph Campbell.
Yeah.
That's
You're close.
close enough. I got the surname right. It's fine. But there is the hero archetype that is a part of every movie. Well, there's this hero idea for your own story.
Yeah.
You can be the hero, and us as parents, we have our story, but we can help our kids write their own story in a very positive way. So I really like that. And it's by the thing that you said that really stuck out to me was that we can help guide them. They're not always going to do exactly what we want or how we would do, but we can guide them to make those decisions and how they can write their own story.
And so kind of bringing this back to the assets, this idea of personal power and all that we've talked about, how powerful could that be in the life of your child? That's one asset.
Right.
Now imagine being this intentional 30 more times, and bringing all these things layer upon layer upon layer of positive things into your child's life, and you can understand why, again, if a child has 31 assets or more, they're very likely to do well in life and go into the positive things and avoid the negative things. If we approach it with, again, just a bit by bit, work on this asset, then work on that one, and then work on that one, it gives a way forward to just add the positives.
And here's the thing I want to bet, if you are listening to this podcast already, there's probably multiple of these assets that you're already doing without even thinking about it.
Well, and to give the church pitch, I will say this. I went through and was looking at the different assets in the 40. Being active in a faith community, especially a strong faith community that's doing a lot of caring work and justice and mercy and all these things, can really help your child experience about 20 of these assets.
That's
so
amazing.
Being a part of a really good faith community that's really active in investing in its young people and investing in its families, things that we're working on and doing around here, that alone can help you do about 20 assets. And so it's really an amazing thing. But it's something we'd like to encourage you to do and start the conversation with your family around this idea of writing your own story. But I think first we want to look at what story maybe have we been writing. Maybe discuss times that you can look back and see that you've maybe been the victim in the story. Yeah. Maybe times that then from that place you went into and did maybe some villain. What are the ways in which you've rose into the challenge and embraced the hero? And then especially for us as parents, how can we look for ways that we're becoming the guide? Again, that we're willing to step back and not be the center of the story, but encourage and support and educate and raise up the next generation of heroes, using our successes and our failures from our times of trying to be heroes to then guide them into their own hero's journey, just like all the movies we talk about.
So this week, receive this blessing. Would you seek to do no harm, seek to do good, and stay in love with God? Go in peace. Amen.